Hi there, and welcome to Embedded Analytics Trends for Building Your Data Strategy. I'm really excited to talk to you today about ways that companies are thinking about using the data that they have access to provide more value to their customers, to their partners, to their suppliers. This trend of embedded analytics is really taking off recently. And I'm going to walk you through a few different ways to build a data strategy that takes advantage of the analytics, the insight that you already have to really enhance the value of your business. My name is Daniel Mintz. I'm the Chief Data Evangelist at Looker, part of Google Cloud, and I'm really excited to dig in. So let's go. Fundamentally, today I want to talk about sort of three different approaches to building that strategy around embedded analytics. The first that I want to talk about is thinking about who your users are and thinking about things from their perspective. So, one piece is really about meeting users where they are, not forcing them to come to you. And the other is thinking about who your users actually are, because every embedded analytics use case, you're going to have different kinds of users. And if you're trying to build for somebody else's users, the chances that you're going to be successful are not very good. So that's the first one we're going to talk about, is sort of, who your users are and how to think about things from their perspective. The second perspective I want to think through is your developers. If you're building embedded analytics, there are probably going to be software developers or analytics developers involved. And so the first thing I want to think about with you is how to make sure that you give them a smooth ramp so that they're not, having to build one thing and then when you want to make changes or improvements, they have to start again from scratch. The second thing is how to integrate principles from the software development lifecycle, which is a really important set of principles, set of ideas that I think we can pull into analytics and embedded analytics specifically, that come from software development, a discipline that has 40 years of learnings that we can adopt. And then the last sort of perspective, the last lens that I want to use to think about embedded analytics strategy is your business. These days, analytics is not something that's nice to have. It's not a premium feature. It is the minimum. And I want you to be thinking not just about sort of direct monetization, but also what indirect monetization looks like and what that means. So we'll go through all of these in a bit more detail as we work through it. So let's dive in. So first, users. So when we talk about meeting users where they are, fundamentally, that's really about recognizing that users today have a lot of tools, right? They have their phones, they have their watches, they have, tablets, they have computers, they have laptops at home, and, even among those, they have tons and tons of apps. And so fundamentally, this is just recognizing that, a lot of users don't have the motivation to go add another tool to their toolkit, right? It used to be maybe if they only had, 2 or 3 apps because they, that's sort of what things were like 20 or 30 years ago. If you said, and now we're going to introduce a whole new app that does data, does analytics, that might be fine. And they might be motivated enough to come learn how to use that application. But today, where they're already inundated with tools, they've got calendar tools, they've got email tools, they have chat tools, they have, maybe if they're a support rep, they have their support tools and their ticket closing tools. If they're an engineer, they probably have, a product management software and as well as, something like GitHub. And, people are just inundated with tools today, and data is not their job for the most part. Their job is whatever their job is, right? Their job is to be a salesperson or to be a product manager or to be a marketer or to be a support person. And so, we want to help them get analytics and do their jobs better by using that data. But that's different than coming to them and saying, hey, you should make analytics a big part of your job. That's not actually an enticing prospect for them. Instead, what we want to go to them and say is, hey, we understand that you're already in Salesforce all day. You're already in, Zendesk all day. We want to help bring data into those tools or into Slack or Teams or, Google Chat, where we can help people do their jobs better by leveraging data to make better decisions. So recognizing that that's where most of your users are going to start from is really important to making sure that you're building in a way that's actually going to meet them where they're at, rather than trying to sort of force them to come to where you are. So that's the first thing, is really recognizing that. The second piece about your users is that there's this tendency to build for average, for the mean. And that's totally understandable, right? If you're building an embedded analytics solution for the first time, you don't want to go build 2 or 3 different solutions. You want to build one solution that sort of serves as many people as possible. So you're like, oh, well, we'll build it. It won't be the most sophisticated, most featureful thing, but it also won't be really sort of featureless and simple, because we want to give people across a broad spectrum of abilities and interest. We want to give them a tool that will make sense to them and that they can use. The problem is, average doesn't actually meet anyone where they're at. And I hear this so many times from companies that have gone and embedded analytics in their tool or in their portal. They go, hey, we built a first version, a first draft, we put it out there, and then we got feedback and it was all negative. How could that be, right? And the reason is that there aren't actually that many people in that average lane, that middle lane. People tend to either be more on the light side or on the power user side. And both of those people are going to be dissatisfied with an average solution. There was one company that came to me and said, we got all negative feedback, and we went and we dug in and we started talking to people, and we said, well, why don't you like what we built? And we heard 2 completely different reasons. One group of people was like, oh my God, this is the most complicated thing I've ever seen. I have no idea how to use it. I don't have time to learn this. This is too much. And then there was a totally different group that was like, what is this baby stuff? I don't want baby dashboards. I want real stuff where I can dig in and slice and dice the data myself, right? And what they realized was they had built for that average, but their users actually fell into 2 totally different camps, and really nobody was in that average, so they weren't satisfying anyone. So instead, what you need to do is go out and do some user research and understand if that is in fact how your user base looks, because chances are it is. And then think about, can we build different experiences built on the same foundation, but different experiences that are going to meet different types of users' needs. That way, you can give your power users the ability to slice and dice, the ability to go really deep into the data so that they don't think that it's baby stuff, but also a really simple interface that just makes sense intuitively to the lighter users who don't have time to dig in too deeply. And that's really what you should be aiming for, is not to build one solution that's going to sort of be in the middle, but instead understand where are your users coming to the problems that they're trying to solve from, and are there different experiences that are needed, different data experiences that are needed in order to meet them there and let them solve those problems better. So those are the 2 pieces of sort of thinking about who your users are and what they're going to be trying to do with your product when you are making your embedded analytics strategy. So then the next piece is really about thinking about your developers. And here, what we want to do is we want to make sure that developers can start with something simple, that it's not that they need to devote 6 months to building a prototype before any customer actually sees it, because that is a very old way of doing things. And it's a way of doing things that too often results in 6 months of effort and a huge waste, because when you do in fact put it in front of people, you find out, as the company from the last example did, that what you built wasn't actually right. So really what you want to do is think about how can we start with something simple, but then make it easy to ramp up over time, to add complexity in order to add more features, more ways to interact with the data. So that's really important from the developer perspective, right? Is making sure that they have that ramp, that they're not building something that's going to hit a dead end and they're going to have to go back to the beginning and start again. And so, you can think about which kinds of tools that something like Looker is going to offer you will build that ramp, right? How do you build a piece of content and start by delivering it as a PDF by email, and then maybe embedding it as a interactive iframe, and then maybe customizing that and using components or the extension framework to really let people have a really custom experience and dig in further. And so, when we think about that, we really think about it in phases. We think about sort of rapid iteration where, that first phase is all about helping people understand, which of the data that you have access to, because you're not going to embed all of your data for your customers or partners or suppliers, but which of that data is going to be the most valuable. And helping understand what are your users' next question, right? If you put data in front of someone, a chart in front of somebody that shows, hey, sales were down a lot last Thursday, their next question is going to be pretty obvious, right? It's, well, why were sales down last Thursday? And so, we want to make sure that we're building something that can help people not just see that sales were down last Thursday, but then ask and answer that next question. So that's going to be something as simple as, reports, dashboards, that's going to get you out the door and in front of real people, real users, very quickly in a matter of days. The next is phase 2, where you might take a week, where you're going to sort of think about what's the minimum viable product that's still an interactive user experience that is more related to the rest of the product. So if your product is a web application, it's no longer phase 1 where we're just delivering a PDF by email that's totally disconnected from your web app, but maybe as a new tab in your web app that embeds an iframe. And so embedding an iframe is really just dropping a snippet of code in after you've built the dashboard or the report in a tool like Looker. And so that is a really great sort of quick follow-on to that prototyping first phase. And then the last phase is really where you're going to dig in. Your developers are going to spend weeks or maybe even months building out a much more custom solution that's sort of purpose-built for the needs of your users. And here, you're not making a wild bet with no idea whether the solution that you invest all this time building is going to land, because you've already done the research and learned from phase 1 and phase 2 what actually is valuable to your users, what they use, and what they're not interested in, right? And so here you can really make a deep investment in building out that custom interface, knowing that that investment won't be wasted. And here you have tons of tools, APIs and SDKs, pre-built UI components, the extension framework, which lets you stand up an application inside Looker on a sort of development surface without having to spin up a separate server. You might even want to give people the ability to explore the data themselves, to schedule delivery of data to themselves and their colleagues, to save content. All of this you can start to do, but you're making an investment knowing that investment is going to pay off. And so really what you're talking about here is a lean startup framework, right? Where you build something, you measure whether it's being used, or you measure, how much people like it by going and talking to them or doing surveys. You learn from that, and that informs the next thing that you build, right? And so this ramp, offering this ramp to your developers where you've got something that gets you to market very quickly and a way to grow into a more custom user experience is really important, so that your developers don't feel like they're wasting time, either by building the maximal solution first and then having that very disappointing moment where they realize no one is actually interested in that solution, or where they build something, they build a rapid prototype, and then when it's time to build the more serious solution, they realize that all the prototyping energy was wasted and they have to start from scratch. So it's really important to have that ramp. The second thing to think about from your developer's perspective is that any software developer worth their salt today is going to want to use software development lifecycle ideas, things like version control, things like REST APIs, things like the ability to have development, staging, and production environments. And it's really important that your analytics solution also incorporates those ideas, because you are fundamentally building software, right? That software is a piece of data software, but it's still software. And we have learned from developers that if you want to have a lot of people collaborating over time to build a complex piece of software and then maintain it through its life cycle, you need to integrate these ideas. So, make sure that whatever you're using to build your embedded analytics is not something that is totally divorced from the software development lifecycle principles, that gives you things like version control, staging, production, where you can roll forward and then roll back if there's a problem. All of those things are going to make the process of building and then crucially of maintaining your solution much easier, much less painful. Because if you want to deliver something that has enormous value and that people start relying on, they're not going to be okay if it goes down for 3 days, right? They're not going to be okay if you're not maintaining it or if the data is wrong, because they rely on it. That's great. You want them to rely on it, but you want to make sure that that you're built in a way that you're going to be able to deliver the sort of resiliency and high standards that they're coming to expect from something that they rely on as a production piece of software that they use every day. So that's number 2 for your developers. Make sure that you've got that software development lifecycle principles at the base of what you're doing. So then the third perspective, the third sort of way to think about what is happening and how you're building your strategy for embedded analytics is really about your business, right? And in the past, static reports were probably fine. They were maybe even a premium feature at one point, right? The fact that you would even get any data back from somebody else was a premium feature. And sure, it would be a PDF or a CSV that came via email or FTP, but that is not what people expect today, right? They want something more interactive, more up to date than static reports. And frankly, you as a business don't want to have somebody where like a week of every month is spent producing static reports. And that often is what we see from customers who are coming to us and ready to sort of upgrade their embedded analytics, right? If you've been doing embedded analytics and delivering data to your partners or your suppliers or even your customers for years, for decades, you almost certainly started by giving them PDFs and CSVs. And maybe now you're realizing that your competition is innovating and going further, and you need to do the same in order to keep up with them. So I think the first thing is, from a business perspective, recognizing that static reports are not going to cut it anymore. So once you come to that recognition, then you need to start thinking holistically about how the ability to embed analytics to give people access to that data really adds value to your business. And there are 2 ways, right? There's direct monetization, which people sort of come to naturally. They think about, well, we could upsell and charge for premium analytics. But there's also indirect monetization, right? Which is really about the enormous value that providing embedded analytics can give your business without actually charging for anything, right? So if you show people how their actions are saving them money, or show how their actions are getting them healthier or fitter, or how much they're using your music service, right? That shows them quite clearly in the data how much value the thing you're providing gives them. And so when you do that, it gives them something to hold on to that's going to improve your customer retention, because they're going to say, well, I don't want to give this up. I listen to 40 hours of music every month. That is of enormous value. Of course, I'm going to pay $7 a month for that, right? And so it gives you a way to prove your value where you are essentially indirectly monetizing those analytics, right? You are adding value to your solution and proving the value of your solution to people so that they think about, oh yeah, this is worth the money that I'm spending on it, right? So that's number 1, that's indirect monetization. And then the other, obviously, is direct monetization, right? The ability to create new revenue streams. And we see lots of people approach this in lots of different ways, but the fact is, the ability to provide analytics and then, more premium offerings where people can go deeper into that data is really a great new potential revenue stream. We see a lot of companies who see the opportunity to sort of give people a little taste of what's possible as a freebie or something that's included in the base platform fee. but then a way to add on more powerful analytics where it's all sort of built on the same platform, the same foundation. So they're not having to, build a whole separate solution for their premium offering, but that then gives them an ability to say, like, here's enough to give you that indirect monetization, to show you the value that my platform is providing, but wouldn't you like to know more, right? Maybe if you're an e-commerce site that sells clothing, maybe you're giving your suppliers, basic access to see which of their styles are selling the best. But then maybe you have things like, forecasting, where you're, helping them understand seasonality and, what styles are likely to be popular next season. Maybe you're, giving them the ability to slice and dice the data any way that they want, rather than in sort of the pre-built reports that you give them for free. And so those give you ways to upsell that data. A lot of times we see people who want more access to historical data, and so that obviously incurs costs for you to hold on to that data and make it available. So that's okay. You can pass that cost on to your customer and use it to increase your revenue. So a lot of opportunity there to enhance your business, both indirectly with that monetization that sort of shows the value, and then directly by actually creating new revenue streams. That's it. Those are the three big trends I want you to be thinking about as you formulate your embedded analytics strategy, right? Number one, think about building for your users, not a generic user, not an average user, not somebody who is absolutely positively ready to spend a week learning how to use your new solution, but instead is busy like all of us and has a thing that they are trying to do, a job that they are trying to do. And so think about where your embedded analytics can fit into their existing workflow and help them be more successful in their job. And whether that is building for that power user or it's building for that light user, that's the way you need to think about your users, who they actually are as people with jobs to be done, rather than a sort of generic idea that you have in your head about who your user should be. The second is really about embracing that developer mindset, recognizing that you are probably going to start with something simple and iterate on it as you learn what is valuable to your customers. And you want that to be a sort of smooth ramp up where you can go from simple things to much more complex, more purpose-built tooling. And to make sure that you're always giving your developers who are building the solution a software development lifecycle, infused way to build, so that what they can build works and it allows collaboration and complexity without making things too hard, and also is something that's maintainable over time. And then the third piece is really thinking about embedded analytics from the perspective of your business, and recognizing that today just having static reports probably isn't going to cut it. And then thinking about the value that embedded analytics can provide to your business, to your customers, your partners, your suppliers, both indirectly by proving the value of the tools that you're already providing, and directly by potentially opening up some new revenue streams. So I hope that's helpful as you're planning out your strategy for embedded analytics. And I hope that you'll check out all the other great sessions here at Join this year. Thanks so much.